is that? So, yeah, just playing around with the sound. So, okay. Hi, greetings. So, today's video is going to be a fun one because you'll be watching it all in one piece, but I'm going to be sharing more on North American goddesses, mostly goddesses, and creation stories with you, and share with you where I'm getting this information, because there's not a lot of information. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but this is mostly on Wikipedia and going through all of their references that they have there, like the genres and the languages and the background, and then doing a little other research with some of the books that I have. And ultimately, because of my basically kind of blank slated spirituality, the closest that was to me was the now known Indigenous peoples. And that was mostly it. We didn't have, we celebrated mainstream religion stuff like Christmas and Easter, birthdays, certain holidays, 4th of July, things like that. But we were indoctrinated in education. That was our religion in our house. Like, we had to read a lot. We did a lot of reading. We did a lot of research. We did a lot of tutoring. And so my personal theory is the question why. Like, that is philosophy in its most poignant statement, is why. Why things, why stuff. And so the focus for me has been, why are women around the world, and especially more dark skin or melanated skin women, the most suppressed and oppressed on this planet? And then the general woman and overall, because even within religions, most of the indoctrination is handed down through males. And so I say women, females. So, why? Why? What would that be? And then why all the then constructs of marriage and behavior and posture and class, and I mean posture as in how you present to the world, as well as posture, but that's a health thing. That's health and healing. Posture as to how you're presented to said world. And from many books written by women or females in this era go into, and even males that will go into anthropology and archaeology and show that the first statue or first, well, what they tell us, because mostly it's looking at nature. You look at nature, you look at the body, and things are feminine, or what is deemed female. And then I shared about darkness and that projection, or presentation, so to speak, and the way that our reception and compensation of those words have influenced things. So the reason why I say all that is because as I'm researching even the little bit that is, and it's not a little bit actually, it's quite a lot of information on, Okay. On the Indigenous that I have looked up. So I said I was going to go into great detail about the Salish people, and I mostly shared most of what I had learned through Wikipedia. And then from what I learned while I was there, from what I remember, is lodges. And so, and even the depiction of the ancient, or not, I shouldn't say ancient, but early transition time period of Indigenous peoples across the Americas, their skin tone is extremely dark. And in these areas are magnificent grids, beautiful lands, most of the coastal land. I mean, if we think about a time when we didn't have to work all the time, and life was about living near and being near resources, those are the places that most of us live, in big cities and such like that. And in those cities are these remarkable, even in small towns, like I'm starting to see the mud flood theory, even in small towns. It's definitely in this town. You can see it. You can see it. And I used to think about these things when I first moved here, and I could feel stuff. But I guess that's the other trick, right? We intuit things and we feel things, but the story is this. So even when I'm learning about the Indigenous peoples' creator deities, who did this come from? Did it originate from their original lands? Was it also some of the peoples that were already here stories? Because some of the names in these different languages, they sound like Spanish, some sound like Hebrew, some sound like French. I mean, I'm starting to realize a lot of our words are originally indigenous, American indigenous words. When it all circles back, because we're told certain words come from Germany, but where did they get it? And this is what I was talking about with the language. Because, okay, let's just talk about language for a second. Because in my other video, I talked about Hebrew. And the writing was different. I can't really speak to say that it was, I can theorize that it was different because of the world. And we think about the word tomorrow. It's an easy one to pick. It used to be written not so long ago, within the last 100 years, to dash morrow. And then we look at morrow. And you see what I'm saying? What are we? And we look up to, and we look up to and what it means today, and then we look up to and what it meant years ago. And then I say it like that, but if you go to certain parts of the Americas, you're going to get a different accent, and you may get a different word for that. Maybe just morrow or mar. You know what I'm saying? Like, language is about sound and communication. And it has changed. As a Gen Xer, and people have argued with me about this, that ain't is a word. Okay, ain't is a word. But when I was growing up, and this is part of, there's so much in this that I'm saying right now, because this is also part of the compensation in the spell, right? So I was taught ain't isn't a word because it's not in the dictionary. Well, it wasn't in the dictionary that my parents subscribed to, so to speak. And back then we had encyclopedias and we had libraries and we had duodecimal cards, and you used to have to wait for your books. You had to wait. And sometimes, say I wanted to do a report on elephants. Well, if 3 other students wanted to do a report on elephants, I better get to school. I better run. And then I'm growing up in a culture where I'm unaware of my position because I'm around a bunch of other people who don't look like me. And these are all parts of the spell. Like everything I just said is all parts of the spell. And then, so, writing is a form of symbols. And we've agreed upon these symbols worldwide. And somebody was able to take symbols, to take thoughts that were words and put them into symbols so that, and then use those symbols to prove or disprove certain theories and certain things. That's math, and that's language. So all of it is a spell, right? All of it is a spell, but also how the spell is used is part of the key. And in this research, like, what? It's so the next, I'm gonna share the how I find it. So I go onto Google and I put in American Indigenous creator gods and goddesses, because in the recognition of nationality, a sense of land and belonging, having a story, a true story of the Americas and the peoples of it. And so was our, meaning the now named African American groups, is it our traditions? Is it a mixture of traditions that came over from the original lands of some of the now known indigenous peoples, or more, like popularized indigenous looking people? Because again, there's a whole culture there. To me, it's similar to being indoctrinated in being African American, coming from Africa, believing I came from Africa, dedicating my education to African American and African studies, which is where I became indoctrinated, because I started seeing the loops and the gaps and the stories and things that didn't match up, and then literally figuring out, like, wait a second, there was already a whole bunch of people here that were very dark toned that we're told just disappeared. And I'm like, didn't that happen around the same time as we're being taught? But then having to wait years. It wasn't until a few years ago, like people like Camiro Ahau and Jane Calloway, and the more popular Somosfinia YT. I know that's correct. I know that's not correct. I just zoned out for a second. Seeing that, when I first started seeing that we're indigenous, I will just say this. It was indigenous people that we are told are indigenous that told me I was indigenous. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because I believe the story so much. And several times I was told, and I still was like, well, how did that happen if we're from Africa? Because it didn't. Not the way that we were told. Okay. So, that's why I put in American Indigenous, because even this is going to pull up what I'm talking about. And And then with the idea of things being matriarchal, so I can see that when things were matriarchal, we would give feminine and masculine energies to things and deities to things, or elements and forces and animals and the earth and sky and the universe in an equal-minded and equanimical society or spirituality. Because if we even, I theorize also that in our teachings, that's what we incorporated. Why? Why is it we're creating this language, symbol? Why? Why are we seemingly being taught backwards? We see like Tesla, and it's some things that just, even when I was younger, I was like, oh, so excited about Tesla, and then finding out how much the cars are and how it all goes, and I was like, well, isn't that completely opposite of what Tesla intended with his recreation of recognizing things that had already existed? With all that said, okay, so I say that also because in some of these stories, I think that there is definitely a link to what has been coined as African or South American, and this is, America, it is America, South American, but specifically like Spanish. What I hear is the indigenous language more than the Spanish, as far as like even the spellings. It's pretty incredible. So is this part of it? Is this part of rewriting the stories? Asking why we were taught in this certain way, asking why, and dissecting even our own answers to that. Whying our own whys. Why do I look at it that way? Why do I feel this way about it? Not all part. I don't know. It's a theory. Okay. Why is philosophy in itself? However, the rest of it, it's just philosophy. I don't even want to try to say that. Philosophizing. I love it. Okay. So, and then several things pop up. And so one of the things that first pops up on mine is the Tawa and Spider Woman, which is one of the first videos I did. And then there's some new ones. Oh my goodness. Maybe because I've been looking, more have come up. All right, so the first that comes up on mine is Tawa and Spider Woman, the Hopi people. We talked a little bit about that, but believe that these two beings created Earth together. Niskam, the sun and architect deity of the Mi'kmaq. M-I-KMAQ. And it brings us back to the Q having a K sound. We see that in Albuquerque. Okay. The Kawatanowit, creator deity of the Narragansett. Azda Nadlihi, the creation deity of changing woman of the Navajo. I think we might have talked about that one, but I will revisit. Oleti, the creator, also known as Coyote Man in Miwok mythology. Great spirit, a benevolent god who maintained worldly order. Earth Mother, a kind and respected goddess who kept farmlands safe and brought maize to the native peoples. white buffalo calf woman, a prophet who bestowed peace upon the people. And this is also kind of a recognition of like the rarity of that mutation, so to speak. A white buffalo. It's like we have a white turkey, which shows up in the feathers. Anyhow, it's just recognizing in nature that is not an issue. Okay? It's not an issue. Okay. Winnie Bojo, a trickster figure who created the current world in the Ojibwe creation myth. And then animals. The Cherokee creation myth tells that animals created the world because they wanted any place to live. Hey, I haven't heard that one. What? That kind of gave me chills. But then why would they let us come? Interesting. I haven't put that one together. I haven't thought about it that way. That animals created the world for themselves. Yeah, I could see that, but then who put us here? Because, well, maybe there were other things like the dragons. Okay, so then not that much has shown up before, so maybe because of my searches continuously more has shown up. You know how that goes. Okay, so then in Wikipedia, list of Native American deities. And then when I click on that, it does say what it's required to say, which is like the article needs additional citations and verification. And that's from 2020, so that's like 4 years ago. And on here it has North American gods, South American deities. That's why I said, well, we'll get into that. Because this is just a tip of the iceberg. There's another clan, group, tribe I want to learn about as well. That I learned from a person of that clan and tribe where I haven't seen, and if I have seen it, I have not put it together. I mean, that's the other thing. This is why I talk about language. A lot of the languages that I've seen here will, even on the West Coast, will relate back to the Algonquin language. I found that a little bit with, I want to say the Salish. More, it might have been the Sahalish, but the languages there are connected. But it seems to me I keep finding links to the Algonquin, and then some of the Algonquin languages have been linked to South American languages. We haven't gotten there yet. So, but I've seen that as far as people who are doing their research around specific tribes and groups, and typically ones that are also becoming more widely well known. Well, the reason why I'm saying this is that, my goodness, there's thousands of tribes and cultures of the Americas. Thousands. And most of them are not, I am not aware of most of them. It seems to me it's not taught in school. I mean, let's just step back for a second and remove the part that we're connected to, the so-called, African brought over here, the actual American also, but the true history of the indigenous peoples that we're told are the indigenous peoples, and their stories that do exist, are not also, where are those being taught at? We don't have the true history of Yosemite, not taught. You can definitely research it, and you can go to Yosemite and you can learn about this, and you can go to these places, and you can do what I'm doing. However, how do we consider the American education system up to par if it's not including the indigenous people? Well, we know why, right? They don't want to talk about it because then they're like, oh, we're real jerks. And we're going to continue being jerks. Okay, so I started with the North American gods, if you remember. I started with the Abenaki. And I spoke about Tabeldoc and some of the links to names like the Abenaki. Doesn't that sound like the Anunnaki? Okay. And then we have Blackfoot, and then Haida. And I think, what? How did I skip them? Okay, so we're going to do that one today. We're going to do that one, and then I'll keep going because, yeah, Haida or Haida. Okay, the Haida are one of the, I'm going to pause it and read it and then reread it, okay? Okay. The Haida are one of the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest coast of North America. Their national territories lie along the west coast of Canada and include parts of southeast Alaska. Haida mythology is an indigenous religion that can be described as nature religion, drawing on the natural world, seasonal patterns, events, and objects for question that the Haida pantheon provides explanations for. Haida mythology is also considered animistic for the breathed of the Haida pantheon and imbuing daily events with Xaayda. And I may not be pronouncing that part right. The innumerable Haida supernatural beings, or Xaayda, including prominent animal crust, wind directions, and legendary ancestors. John R. Swanton, while documenting Haida beliefs as part of the Jessup North Pacific Expedition, recorded that the highest being in all the Haida mythology and the one who gave power to the Xaayda was Sins Sakwanagwa'i, translated as power of the shining heavens. Some have the ability to transform between animal and human forms, while others do not. And the art creations can sometimes be found with anthropomorphic features, especially human faces, inside or as part of their bodies, denoting this transformative ability. So then from here, some of those are highlighted. So this is typically what I do. So because it's the Haida people, I click on the Haida people so I can learn a little bit more about that. So the Haida, and this is English, Haida. It's also spelled with an X. So maybe it's Xaayda or Xaayda. Sometimes they have pronunciation. Let's see if I click on it. No pronunciation. Xaayda or Xaaydas. Xaad, Xaayda. Okay, so Xaayda, okay, are an indigenous group who have traditionally occupied Xaayda Guay and archipelago just off the coast of British Columbia for at least 12,500 years. Let's zoom in here so y'all can see where the group of people are. You see that's the top of Washington State here, and then it goes into Canada, and so it looks like an island. Of course it is an island, because that's what we mastered. There's probably some kind of star fort on there, or some kind of powerful grid line. Okay, so let's see. It does go into more about them. And so I'm going to pause it. Okay, so it says that the Xaayda people are known for their craftsmanship, trading skills, and seamanship. They are known to have frequently carried out raids and to have practiced slavery. They have been compared to the Vikings in Scandinavia and the Vikings of Scandinavia. Okay. Their government consists of a matrix of national and regional hereditary, legislative, and executive bodies, including the Hereditary Chiefs Council. Okay, so we see how that works. And my theory is that originally that came from, similar to what you see in Judaism or Judaism, is the matriarchal lineage. And I think over time it became more patriarchal. However, okay, matrix is what gives me that theory. That was we have recompensated that word matrix to mean like a web or a weaving of, which it is also, but also matrix or matrix is the original mother, right? So just considering that word. Okay, and then they live north of the Canadian and U.S. border, which I just kind of showed. And so it does say that there are some links to tribes in the United States, and that the peoples had lived lower and migrated further north. And just this year, British Columbia transferred the title of over more than 200 islands off of Canada's west coast back to the Xaayda or Xaayda peoples. All right, just this year. But it happened. And then it talks about their history, pre-contact. So here are houses and totem poles. And this picture is 1878. This is why I theorize that Tartaria, because isn't that similar? Let's zoom in a little bit. These are totems, but oh my gosh, how rad are these? Interesting. They kind of look like a dragon. And even like it's definitely a face on the top, but, and then we're just going to zoom back down as to how they're all put. Let's go over a little bit. Look at their little boats. I mean, come on. This is how we know what, So, pre-contact is how this one starts. The people's history begins with an arrival of the primordial ancestress. of the I have trouble. I need to write it down so I don't have trouble remembering how to pronounce it. I'm getting distracted by the H. And so that's the other thing. This is language, right? Because I'm looking at the H, but it's an X sound. So it would be like Z, Xaayda. Okay, so X. People. Okay. Xaayda history begins with the arrival of the primordial ancestors of the Xaayda matrilineages in the Xaayda Guay some 14,000 to 19,000 years ago. Matriarchal ancestress, primordial ancestress. These include, I'm going to say the language I speak, English names. Do not, mispronounce those names. Okay. These include the foam woman, creek woman, ice woman, and ice woman. Okay. So there's three. There's your three, maybe your maiden mother crone. Interesting. Okay. The Xaayda canon of oral histories and archaeological findings agree that Xaayda ancestors lived alongside glaciers and were present at the time of the arrival of the first tree, a lodgepole pine in Xaayda Gua. For thousands of years since, Xaayda have participated in rigorous coast-wide legal system called potlatch. For thousands of years since, the peoples have participated in a rigorous coast-wide legal system called potlatch. Okay, so this is what I do. I click now on potlatch. Then we'll go back. Potlatch is a gift-giving feast practiced by the Indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest coast of Canada and the United States, among whom it is traditionally the primary government. The government. This makes me so mad. But here are some of the peoples that participate in potlatch. It includes the either Hitisuk or Zeltasuk, the Xaayda, the Nuklaks, the Tingit, the Maka, the Tsimisian, the Nucha-Nuth, Kawakawak, the Kawakawak people, the Coast Salish peoples. They all participate in potlatch. Potlatches are also a common feature of the peoples of the interior of Subartrik, adjoining the northwest coast, along mostly without the elaborate ritual and gift-giving economy of the coastal peoples. So here's a picture of one of their homes. Okay. It involves giving away or destroying wealth or valuable items in order to demonstrate a leader's wealth and power. Potlatches are also focused on the reaffirmation of family, clan, and international connections, and the human connection with the supernatural world. Potlatch also serves as a strict resource management regime where coastal peoples discuss, negotiate, and affirm rights and uses of specific territories and resources. Potlatches often include music, dancing, singing, storytelling, making speeches, often joking, and games, the honoring of the supernatural, and the recitation of oral histories are a central part of many potlatches. Okay, and then it goes into Canada also. Canada is similar to the USA as far as how they've, taken the lands from the peoples. Because from 1885 to 1951, their government criminalized potlatches, but they still did it underground because, come on now. But you could get mandatory jail sentences for celebrating. This is so mad. That's why it took until this year for peoples to get their islands back. Keep it coming. Let that roll downhill, so to speak. Bring it into the lower 48. Give the land back. Stop what you're doing, peoples. Okay. For at least 2 months was the mandatory jail sentence. And then, the practice was decriminalized, obviously, in 1951 and reemerged in some communities and may still be the bedrock of Indigenous governance as the Xaayda nation, which has rooted its democracy in the potlatch law. See? Can we do that here? I want potlatch. And then it goes on, but we're going to go back to the Xaayda people. Okay, so I had clicked on potlatch. So for thousands of years since the peoples have participated in a rigorous coast-wide legal system called potlatch. So now we know what potlatch is. And then after the island's wide arrival of red cedar some 7,500 years ago, Xaayda society transformed the center around the coastal tree of life. Massive carved... The tree of life? What? Massive carved cedar monuments and cedar big houses became widespread through the Xaayda 18th century. This is a young Xaayda woman with a lip plate. With a lip plate? Is this not teaching us? Well, I can't show her that part of her body because of YouTube, but a lip plate. The Americas. A lip plate. The Americas. And she's not, she's wearing like an oval shoulder garment. Okay. I'll be right back. So again, we're talking about a culture and time and society when women didn't have to worry about their clothing, even in places where it was cold. Okay, first recorded contact between the Xaayda and Europeans was July 1774. What? What? I'm going to keep reading. I apologize. You see why I'm like, wait a second. Okay. Okay. With Spanish explorer Juan Perez, who was sailing north on an expedition to find, claim, and new territory for Spain. For 2 days in a row, the Santiago sat off the shore of the Xaayda, waiting for the currents to settle down enough to allow them to dock and set foot on land. While they waited, several canoes of the Xaayda sailed out to greet them and ultimately to trade with Perez and his men. After 2 days of poor conditions, however, the Santiago was ultimately unable to dock and they were forced to depart without having set foot on the Xaayda. land. So the peoples conducted regular trade with Russian, Spanish, and British and American maritime fur traders and whalers. Okay. So they traded, pelts and had a strong relationship with coastal people and with Westerners, or Easterners, so to speak. And they had gone on expedition as far as Washington State. At first they had minimal, not the peoples, but the explorers. Then the British came in 1787. I guess I need to learn about Canada's history, because how are they just getting there, but we had America, quote unquote, established in 1776? And we've learned all about the Spanish and all these different wars. How are they mistelling their history now? Oh, goodness sakeys. Okay, so 1787 is George Dixon, and that in the mid 1800s that they were still doing well, and they were even having a profitable China sea otter trade. And then that's where we go into that they had gone in expedition as far as Washington State, and that between 1780 and 1830, the Xaayda came into conflict with European and American traders. Way later? You guys. Among the dozens of ships the tribe captured were the Eleanor and the Susan Sturgis. The tribe made use of European weapons they acquired using cannons and canoe-mounted swivel guns. That's why they say that they were pretty, like warriors. Okay, I'm going to pause and read a little bit and then go back. I'm glad I paused to read that, because what the F? So basically, it's kind of like, we know the story. Things were fine, and then they were not. First, there was, so they say 19th century. So basically, the British came in, and in 1853, they established that island as the Queen Charlotte Islands. Take note of that. Queen Charlotte. She's aware. I think originally her family line was from the Americas. Anyhow, I feel like that will come out eventually, but they were called the Queen Charlotte Islands, and then basically they had integrated kind of like an agreement, but then of course the colonial authorities backed out of their claims by using gunboat diplomacy. Well, yeah. And in 1857, the USS Massachusetts was sent from Seattle to nearby Port Gamble, where Indigenous raiding parties made up of the Xaayda peoples and claimed, but this was from territory now claimed by the British, and the Tongass from the territory claimed by the Russians those peoples had been being attacked and enslaved, and those people were attacking and enslaving the Salish people I was just talking about. Okay, when the Xaayda and Tongass, which are called also the Sea Lion tribe, the Tlingit warriors refused to acknowledge American jurisdiction, and to hand over those among them that had attacked the Puget Sound communities. That's that part, the Salish peoples communities. A battle ensued in which 26 natives and one government soldier were unalived. And then in this aftermath, Colonel Isaac Ebay, I'm starting to wonder now after watching, what's it called? My Lunch Break. I'm starting to read these things being like, wait, are these people for real? Okay. Anyhow, he was a U.S. military officer, obviously a colonel, and the first settler on Whidbey Island. First settler on Whidbey Island when we just spoke about how these islands were all had indigenous people on them. Grr. Anyways, he didn't make it very long. And okay, and then there are also a group from Alaska, which is what is now named Kale, Alaska, that did that to that colonel in retaliation for their chief being unalived by the raid. So here's another example of the American or the American Indian Wars, right? Because they just, I don't know why they call them wars. This is literally like just straight up takeover and massacres. Anyhow, then they have the smallpox epidemic in 1862, and they say that one person traveling from San Francisco had smallpox. Isn't that also interesting? Because we don't have stories about a smallpox outbreak in San Francisco. Oh my God. Okay. And then, so this outbreak takes kind of over in their population and seems to be continuous to spread. And that, so to heal this, they burned some of their homes and then began vaccinating and quarantining these groups that ended up basically being moved off their land from the smallpox, okay? And then those who did survive, a group of copper miners come over, and they also bring more smallpox. So it's kind of like they made it through that one person who came, and then now and one of the statements they say, in June, the encampments were forcibly cleared by police. Doesn't this, oh my gosh, every time I read these things, I'm like, I'm not going to stop it. The encampments were forcibly cleared by police, and 20 canoes of the Xaayda peoples, many of whom were likely already infected with smallpox. Oh my God. Anyways, they were forced back on certain ports of island by gunpoint, basically. And then later on, a group of copper miners traveled, and they brought more smallpox. And the statement in this is the article, reference in this is, this might not have been a disaster should the infected miner have stayed isolated. Doesn't sound familiar. Doesn't sound like a repeat story to, oh my goodness. Okay. Then the potluck ban, which we talked about a little bit. All right. So they banned potluck and they made it illegal and you could go to jail, and it really interrupted their cultural pattern. So this is what they do. This is what they did to the great mothers. Because I want to do a potlatch. So this is where we get potluck from, probably. Right? Man, y'all. Okay, and then it says the islands were then Christianized, and a lot of their cultural works, such as totem posts and obviously their homes, were destroyed or taken to museums around the world. And a lot of the people who are catching up to, even when I went to San Diego and I was in the Museum of Man and they're showing us stuff from South America and then saying it's from Egypt. What? Stop it. Y'all better stop it. It's okay. We know the truth. We know what's really going on. So it also, because of banning potlatch, it just really diminished the morale as well and their own knowledge of their history and their peoples. Okay, so then they jump 20th century. They let that marinate for a century, and change their whole understanding. But of course, the fight continued for years. Oh, in the 20th century, then they're moved to schools. And, we've seen, if you watch, even if you don't watch the news, you've probably seen some of the information about them finding all kinds of stuff around the schools in these places. So, then there were the Liel Island protests. And in November of 1985, during the protests, people were arrested. And because of the publicity of the people getting arrested, specifically elders, more attention was brought. And so thus begins fighting and, bringing awareness to the peoples. Then in 2009, they gave the islands that were formerly called the Xaayda Islands, that they changed the name to Queen Charlotte Islands, reclaimed their name back. The government gave the name back. And then, in the term Xaayda Nation often refers to the Xaayda people as a whole. However, it refers to their government. And the people's ancestry are entitled to the Xaayda citizenship, including the Kaigani, who are Alaskans and as part of the Central Council of Tlingit, the Tlingit people, or Tlingit. Oh my gosh, I apologize. Tlingit. I just skipped over the L. I apologize. And then in a deal negotiated between the government, this Canadian government, and the Xaayda Nation over the preceding decades, BC and British Columbia in 2024, this year, transferred the title of more than 200 islands back to the peoples. And then it goes into the culture. I've been on for about an hour. Talks about the language. It is considered to be an isolate language. It was banned in schools. You had to use English. Now they're trying to bring the language back. Talk about potlatch. Back again. Talking about art. And their art. Notions of wealth. Which they created notions of wealth, which is the introduction of the totem pole and the Brentwood box. Missionaries, of course, misinterpreted the images. So I think they speak about the art because that's part of their traditions and their peoples. And then transformation masks. Okay. It's pretty long. Goes into, even talks about gender roles. And then religion. So we'll do a part 2, okay, of the Xaayda people, and we'll go into their culture because it's a lot, of course. Let's see here. This is a potlatch, all their regalia. I just find it interesting because look, they have fuzzy hats. Who has fuzzy hair? They have fuzzy hats. And they also have the, I think like almost like original, of course it's warm. I mean, fuzzy hats are going to be warm, so I don't want to, it's just things I've noticed in other cultures. Similar like the Scottish culture where they have the big tall, even in the British, some of the British hats, is a big tall hat that's black and typically fuzzy. And so my theory is that mimics the hair of the Great Mothers. My theory. But just let's see if I can zoom in on the hat without exposing people. There we go. That's a good one. So, fuzzy hat. And then it has a totem on it. It looks like a hawk. I don't want to say an eagle because it may not be, but it looks like a hawk's beak. There it is. Oops, I'm showing his face a little bit. I mean, it is public, but I mean, it's on Wikipedia. Okay, but yeah, when it goes into the culture, it speaks about the language, and I can, I want to click on it. I clicked on it, and let's see, just kind of shows where there are. Endangered. The peoples? The language? The language might be endangered. I will read. So that will be our next one. We'll go into language, and even says there are a number of systems for writing Xaayda using the Latin alphabet, each of which represents the sounds of Xaayda differently. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so we will have a part 2 on the Xaayda peoples. I'll see if I can actually find some pronunciation to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly and interpreting the X's and stuff. So that's the Haida people. I didn't know I missed them, so that's kind of exciting. But to go back to that, so the list of Native American deities, because today I thought we were going to be talking about the, let's see, because, okay, so on that same page, the Haida, the Ho-Chuk people, the Hopi, the Innu people. I think I spoke about that. I think I only spoke about the deity. So there's a lot here, because I also was going to talk about the moon. I'm going to have to do a whole new video because there's a lot. The Inuit, the Iroquois, Klamath, the Kawatiuli. That was one of the deities of the peoples we just spoke about, or group. Interesting. The Lakota, the Mi'kmaq, another group, right, was mentioned. Miwok, Narragansett, Navajo, Pawnee, Salish, Seneca, Sioux, Snohomish. And the Snohomish have they have a supreme deity. And then we haven't even gotten to the deity, because the deity of the, oh my gosh. Anyways, that's how many. Then we got Snohomish, Taino, Tongava, and Wendat. Wendat. So I want to get into those as well. And that's just North American. And it's on Wikipedia. And then there's South American deities. I'm not even going to click on that, you guys. I will never get off. Okay, so, yeah, before I do jump off, the whole point of going into the peoples of the Xaayda is to talk. So their goddess, they have one of their gods is Tia. I can't wait. I'm so excited. And she's the goddess of peaceful death. Is that like Tiamat? Okay. So until next time, until the next video, and we'll remember that we're picking up with language, or basically the culture. And we'll also talk about the goddess of peace and death in that video. Interesting, because they have two gods, obviously, one of a peaceful death and one of a not so peaceful death. And then I wanted to mention so many of these deities have, like, the lunar deity. That's interesting. Okay, lunar deity, death deities, cold weather. They have cruel, and also go with master of bears, sea mother, goddess of the hunt, sea goddess, ruler of the underworld. Come on now. Sky god, summer, the wind god. We talked about the morning star, and also the god dawn. Winter, there's a god winter, god of good, god of bad. Fertility, raven spirit, peace. Creator deity, changing woman. Speaking gods. The water sprinkler, rain god. A lot of these lunar, solar deities, trickster, solar deities, sacred clown, very similar. I mean, these are different tribes, but similar greater stories. And supreme, great spirit. Great spirit is in more than one. And then, okay, let's see. Lady of the winds, deity of chaos and disorder. So sometimes I think some of religion has also helped us change how we see darkness, light, chaos, disorder, right? It's part of nature. So we would describe chaos or like things happening in nature, I feel like, more as chaos than, disorder, meaning things are, wild, out of place and no control. Okay. But my point is, there's gods of the weather, there's gods of rainstorm, there's gods of dogs. There's a dog in the Taino religion, or deities. There's not information on here. Some of these come up red, meaning they know that these deities exist, but there isn't an article or reference for them, or there isn't enough information that's been given to this website, so to speak. But there is a dog-shaped god that watched over the dead. Y'all, come on. Okay, greater storm god. So that's the other part. Like in a lot of westernized religion, it's one god in charge of all the things. So wouldn't that also make it somewhat like in our mind of compensation different than maybe mastering one force or one element? I don't know. Just a thought. Okay. Thanks for joining. I will, again, I do want to talk about the moon calendar, especially with everything going on recently. And I was going to do something else today too in the video. I was going to talk about, so that will be part 2. We'll go into the DDTia and more about the culture of the Xaayda people. Hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. All right, so a little fun again with sound. So yeah, this is a little. I'm using the side that has, I think it's leather that's on it, on the guitar as well. So, and then I was like, first I did it without. Ooh, look at that hue. Oh, it's from the light. I always do that. I'm like, oh, look at that purple. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that's the light. Which is still cool, but. So now I have it in G. Now it's G. I thought that was kind of cool but it doesn't really sound that strumming it. See, try the wood side and see what happens. Well, also I could. Thanks for listening, watching, sharing, your inputs, your subscriptions. And until next time, take care.